Imagine a world where England as we know it never existed. No castles, no crowns, no Game of Thrones-esque wars that shaped the nation we're familiar with today. But let's rewind and talk about how this iconic country came to be. You've heard of the United Kingdom and Great Britain, but before any of those existed, there had to be England. The year was 927 AD, and it wasn't some accidental formation either. This was the result of centuries of bloodshed, betrayal, and survival. So how did England go from being a patchwork of tribes to one solid kingdom? Hit that subscribe button and let's dive straight in. To get there, we have to go back to the fall of the Roman Empire, when they left Britain hanging, vulnerable to new threats. Ever seen the chaos left behind in a blockbuster movie where the hero leaves too soon? That's exactly what happened here. As the Romans exited, a whole new wave of people swooped in. Initially, Anglo-Saxons entered, the Germanic tribes, who weren't exactly invited but stuck around anyway. They were supposed to help fend off the native Britain's enemies, like the Picts and the Scots. But surprise! Once they pushed them out, the Anglo-Saxons turned on the Britons and claimed the land for themselves. Kind of like when your friends help you move into a new place but end up keeping the best room. By the 7th century, these guys were in charge, forming small kingdoms with names that sound like they came straight out of a fantasy novel. Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria, and a few others. Now, flash forward to 793, when out of nowhere, a Viking army stormed the Lindisfarne monastery. It wasn't just a robbery, it was a full-on power shift. Over the next few decades, Vikings systematically took over Anglo-Saxon lands. East Anglia, gone. Mercia, vanished. Northumbria, see ya. By 875, Wessex was the last kingdom standing, and Wessex had a hero, Alfred. When his brother King Ethelred died, Alfred took up the crown. But this wasn't some glorious coronation. Alfred had to face the Vikings head-on, and at first, he kept them at bay by paying them off. Talk about avoiding a fight. But soon, he had enough and led his army to a stunning victory at the Battle of Hastings, driving the Vikings out of Wessex for good. Alfred had to fend off the Vikings and keep Wessex standing. Can you imagine the pressure of being the last hope for an entire kingdom? What would your strategy be? Share your thoughts in the comments. And this was just the beginning. Alfred's win laid the groundwork for something bigger. Something no one could have predicted. A united England. When the King of Wessex died in 911, you would think there'd be chaos, right? But instead, we saw a unique duo rise to power. Edward the Elder and his sister, Ethelflaed. These two weren't just siblings, they were a powerhouse team, expanding territories and putting pressure on Viking-controlled areas like Danelaw. In 917, Ethelflaed, Lady of the Mercians, gained so much ground that York surrendered without a fight. Viking diplomacy at its finest. Sadly, her reign ended when she passed, and her daughter, Alfwin, was ousted, giving Edward of Wessex a chance to take Mercia. By 924, Edward's son, Ethelstan, inherited a stronger kingdom and aimed higher. Through strategic marriages, he gained control of Northumbria and called himself King of the English. This is called in history the true birth of England. Now in 937, Ethelstan invaded Scotland, leading to the Battle of Brunanburh, where the Scots, Irish, and Vikings joined forces. Despite heavy losses, the English triumphed, unifying the nation and sparking pride. After Ethelstan's death in 939, Viking leader Olaf returned to reclaim Northumbria and Mercia, but King Edmund, Ethelstan's half-brother, swiftly pushed them out for good. Edmund's invasion of Strathclyde ended in shared territories with Scottish King Malcolm I, but his assassination in 946 left Edred to rule. Edred faced Norwegian King Eric Bloodaxe in a decade of warfare, eventually reclaiming Northumbria for England. After Edred's death, his nephew Edwig briefly ruled before Edgar. Known as Edgar the Peaceful, took over, stabilizing and uniting England with reform. With solid borders and peace, England was finally united. But the story doesn't end here. We need to talk about William the Conqueror and the epic Battle of Hastings, which forever changed England's future, and trust me, you'll want to stick around for that. But first, let's explore who this man really was. William I, or William the Conqueror, as history remembers him, was born around 1028 in Falaise, Normandy. Before he ever set foot on English soil, William had already made a name for himself, not just as a noble, but as one of the most powerful men in all of France. But he wasn't born into this position easily. His early life was marked by danger and intrigue. Imagine a young boy who wasn't even considered legitimate by many, yet he was poised to become one of the greatest rulers of the Middle Ages. His father, Robert I of Normandy, died when William was only 7, leaving the young boy in charge of a duchy that was teetering on chaos. You see, in those times, being born out of wedlock carried a heavy stigma. William was known as William the Bastard, and that title wasn't just an insult, it was a constant reminder of his precarious position. Many nobles saw his youth and illegitimacy as opportunities to challenge his claim to power. William's early years were filled with danger. His guardians were assassinated one after another, and at times, it must have seemed like his survival was a miracle. Yet, through all of this, his mother, Herleva, played a crucial role in protecting him. She wasn't from a noble family herself, but her strength and cunning ensured that William lived to fight another day. And fight he did. By the time William turned 15, he was knighted and had begun to take control of his duchy. But being a teenager, trying to hold together a fractured Normandy was no small feat. For nearly a decade, William battled against a series of baronial rebellions, many of which were led by his own family members. At times, his rule hung by a thread. But this was where William learned to become the calculating, relentless leader that history would later celebrate. He wasn't reckless, and he didn't take unnecessary risks, but when he had an advantage, he pressed it ruthlessly. In 1047, with the help of Henry I of France, William crushed a major revolt at the Battle of Hastings. This was his first taste of real victory and solidified his power in Normandy. From then on, William's rise was steady. He took back rights that had been lost during the chaotic years of his youth and brought rebellious nobles under control. It wasn't always easy, but William had something that many of his rivals lacked: patience and a clear sense of purpose. This period also marked the beginning of William's transformation from a young duke struggling to keep his duchy together to a ruler capable of much more. The Battle of Hastings was one of those moments in history where the world swung on the edge of massive change. William the Conqueror didn't just wake up one morning and decide to invade England. The stakes were huge. He knew that defeating Harold Godwinson, the King of England, would forever alter the course of history. But first, there were plenty of obstacles to overcome. William had gathered his forces by August of 1066, ready to make his move, but Mother Nature had other plans. The winds weren't in his favor, delaying his departure and creating anxiety among his troops. It is almost like you're planning a grand road trip, but your car won't start. But there was a silver lining. Harold, thinking the invasion wasn't happening, dismissed his army. Finally, on September 27th, after what must have felt like an eternity, the winds shifted, and William set sail for England. His ships, though, lost each other in the dark. But William was very cool about it. He ate with his crew like it was just another day, reassuring everyone that things were under control. Not long after, his fleet reunited, and on September 28th, they landed on England's shores at Pevensey. Now, you'd think Harold would have had more time to prepare, but fate had other plans for him too. Just days earlier, he'd fought off a Viking invasion up north at Stamford Bridge, a brutal battle that left him with exhausted troops and a false sense of security. He raced back south to meet William at Hastings, and on October 14, 1066, the two armies finally clashed. It was not your average medieval skirmish. Harold's men formed a solid shield wall, standing their ground while William's cavalry and archers tried to break through. But Harold's lines held strong, and for a moment, it looked like William might lose. That's when William, a clever strategist, decided to play a trick. His cavalry pretended to retreat twice, only to draw Harold's troops out of their defenses. The English chased after them, only to be met with a brutal counterattack. And then, in one of the most famous moments of the battle, Harold was struck down, legends say by an arrow to the eye, although many historians debate its authenticity. While their king dead, the English forces crumbled and William had won. By Christmas Day of 1066, William was crowned King of England in Westminster Abbey, celebrating his victory. But becoming king wasn't the end of William's story. It was just the beginning. Over the next few years, he faced rebellions, but every time, William stamped out resistance with ruthless efficiency. Over the next few years, he faced several rebellions, but every time, William stamped out resistance with ruthless efficiency. He built castles all over England to secure his control, including the famous Tower of London, a constant reminder of Norman power. William didn't stop with military control. He restructured the entire country. The English aristocracy was replaced with Norman lords, and a French-speaking ruling class emerged. It was like someone hit a cultural reset button. Even the language, literature, and architecture began to change. The England we know today, with its castles and class system, owes a lot to William's reign. Now, despite all his success, William's later years were marked by political strife, particularly with his eldest son, Robert, who fought with his father over power. In 1087, during a campaign in France, William was injured, some say fatally ill. He spent weeks dying at the priory of St. Gervais, and on September 9, 1087, he passed away. But of course, even his death couldn't be simple. During his funeral, a fire broke out, and to make matters worse, his body didn't fit in the stone coffin. Talk about going out with a bang, or in this case, a very awkward funeral. His legacy, however, was anything but awkward. William the Conqueror left an indelible mark on England. From the castles that still stand to the very language we speak, his conquest reshaped an entire nation. During his reign, William crushed rebellions, controlled Anglo-Saxon women, overhauled the church, and built castles all across England to maintain control. His victory didn't just secure his throne, it severed England's ties with Scandinavia, shifting its focus toward France and the rest of Europe. Within England, the changes were even more radical. The introduction of land tenure and military service paved the way for feudalism, and William redistributed land to his loyal Normans, forever altering the social landscape. This was the war that shaped the world. But here's the question: what if William had never won? How different would our world be today? Share your thoughts in the comments. And thank you for watching.